Hi, my name is Evan Givens, and I'm welcoming you guys today to my intro to photography for teens and kids. Pretty much today we're going to go over a few things, how to shoot in manual, we're going to go over how the camera actually works, and a few different styles, and pretty much how to take a good portrait. So first things first, we have a film camera, which is kind of how it all started. You're gonna load film into the back, and you also can play around and get some really cool things. Because it's a chemical reaction, you get a little bit of a more fun and detailed shot with it. But if you're shooting a lot of cool things and you need to be on the go, the digital camera is a little bit easier, also known as a DSLR. Stands for digital single lens reflection. So I'll let a few more people pile in here so I can really dig into the information and give you guys a pretty cool update on everything and show you guys how to take a good portrait. So, first thing I'd like to talk to you guys about in this class is going to be your triangle of exposure. So pretty much you have three things when you shoot in manual that are going to affect how clear and pretty much the outcome of your entire picture. You have your aperture, which is going to determine how much light gets into the lens. You have your ISO, which started out with film photography, which means how sensitive the film is to picking up light. And then you have your shutter speed, which is how fast your picture actually takes. Now, all three of them end up balancing out to give you your perfect shot. It's a little bit difficult to understand in the beginning, but the more you shoot, the easier it is going to be. So let's start out with ISO. Pretty much, your film will have or your sensor if you're using digital, will have an indication of how sensitive it's going to be. Your rule of thumb usually, if you want a really crisp, like let's say you're shooting for a magazine or like you want to post these everywhere, is to usually keep it under 800 ISO, but with how fast cameras have been improving, you can take it all the way up to like ridiculous, like 6400 ISO, and pretty much that means it works really well in low light. So a lot of event photographers will keep a big flash on their camera to get a little extra light and make it to where it's really crisp even if it's super dark outside. But for today we're just going to talk about like natural light like we're using now and having a really crisp photo. So your ISO, the smaller you have that number, the more crisp the photo is going to be. If you have a 100 ISO, that means it's going to be bright outside, super nice, daylight, really easy to get a crisp focus and everything to be beautiful. If you have something higher, like 800 to 1200 or even higher, that means it's going to be really dark, low light. It's going to be a little bit harder to focus and harder to get that crisp photo unless you use flash or additional lighting. When we're talking about shutter speed, we're going to be talking about how fast the photo is actually taken. So if you were to use a really fast shutter speed, you'll hear a really fast quick click. Or if you set it to where it's really slow, you'd hear a long click. And then it takes that photo. So the longer you have the space of time that the photo can be taken, the more light you get in there, and the easier to make a dark situation look lighter. I usually keep my shutter speed over 160 just to make sure that everything is crisp and frozen in the moment, but it's not really bad to go lower than that. If you keep it around 80, that means you won't really shake too much, but a good rule of thumb is whichever style of lens you are using to make sure it doesn't go below the millimeter of the lens. So if you have a 24 millimeter, It's a little bit easier to keep that shutter speed low, but just rule of thumb, try not to go under like 40 because it is going to be a little bit shaky. Now, if you're using film, it's a little bit easier to get that reaction just because of how like the chemicals work and how lighting works, but depending on what you're using it for, you can bounce back and forth. And last but not least, your aperture. Aperture is going to be how much light is let in through that lens. So usually you can see inside the lens. It's a little bit harder on live to show you guys up and close and personal, but when you look down there you can see usually it's shifting from super wide to super narrow. So like if you have it super wide, you're going to get a lot of light into the lens and you're going to get a little bit less depth of field, which means like some stuff in the background will be blurry, but while closer up, it'll be nice and on point. But the wider you have it, the more light you get in. So if you're in a low light situation, you need to keep the aperture very low, the shutter speed low, and the ISO high. But enough of that. Now that you guys kind of understand a little bit more about the triangle and how each one of them affect each other, we can talk about other helpful tips in portrait photography. Now, if you don't fully understand like how each one affects them, they do have different settings to make it a little bit easier. If you use auto, it'll decide all three of those for you because of the light meter tells it how bright or dark the photo needs to be. Or you can use these other three options. You have your shutter speed priority, which is where it shows you the shutter speed that you want it to have. You set that and it determines the other two for you. So if you have something really fast and you don't have enough time to figure out how you want to set up the shot perfectly, put it on shutter speed priority and it will go ahead and choose mainly off of the speed that you calculated. Now, you can also have it for aperture priority, which means you set how much depth of field you want. So if you have it on f1.8, it'll be really shallow focus, but it'll be able to get a lot brighter in there and it'll choose the shutter speed and the ISO for you. Of course, unless you're using film, which it will just choose the shutter speed because the ISO is determined by the film. Now, last but not least, you have your fully automatic or manual setting. If you go manual, you choose all three. If you go automatic, you literally just go ahead and let the camera do its thing and it'll pop out a product for you. It's usually going to be a lot more balanced, but you don't get to choose whether you want it to be moody lighting or if you want it to be super crystal clear and balanced lighting. It kind of just chooses what it thinks is best based off of the light meter and what photo it is going to take. Now, next, if you have a DSLR camera, big thing you're going to want to know is what is the best lens for you to choose. There are plenty of different types of lenses and it all will vary on how much you want your photo to vary. If you want something super wide and it's not necessarily as much about the subject, you know, you want to have it big and really spaced out, you're going to want to use a very low millimeter. So this is a 24 millimeter camera lens and it works really well for being right up on your subject or being very far back and getting a big picture. But if you want it cropped in a little bit tighter, you're going to have to go ahead and use a larger lens. Like this is an 85 millimeter lens. Great for portraits. Like literally if I'm shooting portraits, I have one of three lenses that I use. The 50 millimeter, which is like your balanced, this is your like day-to-day lens. You can kind of shoot anything with it and it'll look pretty solid. Or you can bump up to the 85, which usually is a little bit more tight. It's great for portrait photography because you don't have to be too close to the person or too far away and it gets a nice tight crop in around the person. And that's really great when you're trying to just have a solid portrait that doesn't really affect too much outside, you know, it's just about the person. If you want, you can go a little bit larger. This is a big zoom lens, but I use this whenever I'm trying to shoot about 115, which is even a tighter crop, or if I'm shooting way far away, because this goes from 80 to 400. So I can be real far. It's good for concert photography and a lot of different things where you can't be right up on the person. But if you need a really tight crop, going higher up in the millimeter is great. Also, if you're just doing it for fun and you don't really need to have all that, you can just get a point and shoot camera. I like this one. It's just a Polaroid snap, so you can literally just look through here, take the photo, and it prints out a nice little photo for you so you can have it in the moment and just give it away. It's a little bit more pricey because you have to buy those individual photos, but once again, it's great to have in the moment. I keep it in my jacket pocket just so if anything cool happens, I can slide it out, because the best camera to have is the one you have with you. Doesn't do a whole lot to be a good photographer if you never have a camera with you. So, next thing we're going to talk about how you take your portraits. There's a few different things that can affect it. I love doing a lot of different styles of photography, so bouncing around and having a really good knowledge of how you want your photo to look is very important. How you take your photo says a lot about it. I have some like moody photos here, but this is just to show you how you can take your picture. So landscape is when you have it sideways, which is the normal way most people hold their cameras, and it gives you a good idea of a landscape because that's how you see things normally. But portrait photos are a little bit easier to do this way, to where you get a better sense of up and down on the person. You can get a really clean shot of their face and just make it a little bit easier to show off them as a person. So a lot of portrait photography is done in portrait. Now, it's nothing wrong with doing a landscape shot of a person. Usually that just means you want to show off more of the area rather than them. And it's really good to have, you know, that flexibility to change up how that photo is actually going to be. Now, with these individual shots, it's as easy to change from here to here just to make sure you aim it just how you want it, because there are plenty of rules in photography, but rules are meant to be broken. So as long as you like the picture, it's taken correctly. There are so many different things that you can veer off on and really have a good time with, learning little by little how to take a photo that perfectly suits your style and how you see it. But that's one of the best things about photography, is how you make that picture and how you craft it shows a lot about you just as much as it shows about the subject. Now, there are a lot of things, like your camera will probably come with a zoom lens, which is really good for being able to like get far back and then get really in on that photo. And once again, it's good to have that variance and be able to jump around, but it also will affect the quality. A lot of times you won't have a very high aperture that you can go to, a very low aperture that you can go to, because to have that shift makes it need to change a little bit. Sorry if that sounded confusing. But yeah, having the bigger lenses usually have higher apertures, and that makes it to where you need a little bit more sunlight. But if you're out just having fun taking pictures, I recommend having a 50 millimeter. It's a super easy and versatile lens to have. You can see this is the Nikon 1.4. Makes it easy to be able to shoot and just play around with. Very easy to have almost all different types of photography 50-50 because it's so easy. And it gives it a really good street photography feel, to where it's wide, it feels very in the moment, very action-packed, which is good when shooting just with like a kick-around camera. Now, I know photography can get very expensive very fast, so one thing that I like to recommend is if you're out with your parents, and you can look through pawn shops, like thrift stores, places where they give away and like sell a lot of used items. It's really good to go there and see different things to like pick up. Um, Film photography is probably going to be the cheapest to get the camera, but once again, you have to pay or learn how to develop it yourself, which can be a costly and or more difficult process. Once again, that's going to be your best bet for getting a cheap camera. You can also check places like Marketplace and like Let Go, different resale apps, to get a really nice clean camera. When I first started photography, I did not think I was going to be able to afford a camera, so I went on like Marketplace and like different things like that, and then ended up getting a very cheap camera and then using it for a while, and once I got more jobs, I got bigger and better cameras. That's usually the name of the game and how you become a little bit more successful. But you can find lenses from anywhere from like thousands of dollars, which you probably won't jump into, but you can find little cheap knockaround lenses. Like I found this one for about $40 at a store. It's not worth $40, but I found it for $40, and that's what matters. And then you can get a little resale. Like I hardly ever buy new equipment. I got this for very cheap on Facebook. I think I paid about $60 for it, and it's about 120 new. So you can always find a cheaper option and make sure that you are, one, having all the equipment you need, and two, having a good time. Because if you're poor at the end of the day when you use all of this equipment, it's fun, but it can get taxing. So I always recommend trying to find the best deal, which means researching and getting everything perfect, and then going back and using your equipment to the best of your needs. Once again, having a solid lens that you can use for a lot of subjects is a really good idea. Now that we've got a general understanding of, one, how to get yourself a nice camera, two, how to use said nice camera in any subject, we're going to go to step 3, which is taking a solid portrait. Now, you have plenty of different ways. A lot of people shoot differently. I end up liking a lot of photos to say a lot about the person. So if there's any way you can use mise-en-scène, which pretty much just means the stuff in the photo, to tell a little bit about the story, I always recommend doing that. You can say this person likes to have a lot of pinks, like that's always what they wear, or they like to sew. You can have like little needle and sewing kits in the area just to fill out a little bit more, because you have to tell a lot of a story in one photo, which is hard to do. But once you get a little bit of the setting correct and have everything set up to tell a lot about a lot of things and about this person in one photo, then you can move forward into actually taking the photo. Now, if you want it to have a light, breezy feeling, really fun and open and happy, you're going to want to use a lower f-stop. So anywhere around 1.8 to 3.2 is going to have a bright, less shadowy look to it, because that gives a lot more light time to bounce into the photo. You're also going to want to use lower shutter speed. The faster it is, the less light can get into the photo, which means more shadows, more darkness. So if you're looking to make it emotional and moody, you're going to want to have a higher f-stop. You're going to want to have a higher shutter speed. That's going to make it darker. If you want it to be happy and friendly and poppy and have a good yay feeling to it, you're definitely going to want to have a slower shutter speed, a larger aperture, and an ISO that's pretty poppy. So best thing is to have these nice, well-lit, bright spaces. The more white and bright colors in the background will make the photo brighter itself. Now, if you want to have a portrait photo that seems serious and look very, you're going to want to do stuff with a little bit more dramatic lighting. So having it go from a bright colorway to a very dark is going to make it more shadowy and moody, and have it to where you can really feel that sense of conflict in it. Anything that you can have two opposite or opposing ideas fused into one is going to make more contrast or more conflict in the photo. So going from bright to dark is going to make it more serious, more gloomy, more, I guess, aggressive in a way. If you want it to be bright, fun, and friendly, you're going to want to do a nice full picture, like lighting everywhere. Usually a lot of beauty companies will have it lit from left to right perfectly to where you have a lot of nice crisp detail. If you use flash on those photos, it does take a time to like refine and get the flash perfect, but doing that will make it a little bit more crisp. You'll see a better defined jawline, highlights on the face, which once again will make it look very beautiful and distinct. So having that variety is going to be good for any photographer to know a good range to where you can always fit perfectly in your art, to make sure that it is just the way you want it, because intentional art is always the best art. If you just have stuff in there just to have it in there, it will muddy it and make it not as precise as you want it. So taking the time before shooting your photo will always make a photo just that much better. But I won't keep you guys for too long. I just want to give you guys a general understanding of the photography world and like how to take certain different photos and how to give it the desired outlook that you want. Remember, always have some type of camera on you if you're very serious about photography and want to make just your livelihood this thing. You always want to have something to where you can cleanly and quickly make something. You know, coming away with a photo is a big part of photography, to where one, you're getting better every time because you're practicing, and two, having something for the day is always great. So make sure you guys just work really hard. Hard work makes a great effort. So know which camera you have will do what. 2, make sure you take the photo that you intentionally want. And 3, go ahead and make sure you're always practicing, always moving forward, because that is the biggest thing with any craft, is to make sure that you are progressing and doing better. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you guys. Thank you to Greenville Center for Creative Arts for giving me this opportunity, and for giving you guys this opportunity to learn a little bit more about portrait photography and how your camera works in general. But yeah, thank you. You guys have a wonderful day, and get outside and take some great photos. All right, bye everybody.